Over the millennia, Newcastle has had many identities. The earliest settlement, Pons Aelius as it was known, was a bridgehead of the Roman world. Hadrian's Wall was the edge of an ancient empire. Northumbria was the cradle of Christianity, and medieval Newcastle a town of huge importance. By the 17th century, Newcastle was considered the second town of the kingdom, and in 1609, Newcastle was described as the glory of all towns in the country. In 1633, beyond all compare the fairest and richest town in England, inferior for wealth and building and no city save from London. Its mineral wealth was renowned, and for 2 centuries the region fueled the Industrial Revolution and made Britain the workshop of the world. This was the home of the locomotive, the birthplace of the railways, the supplier of ships to the world, where electricity supply, electric light and turbine power were developed, and in the 19th century, Newcastle was known as a town making more strides in wealth, population and importance than any other in the British Empire. The story of Newcastle is one of change, but also one of continuity. It's a long, fascinating story which goes back to the Roman times. The line of Hadrian's Wall ran from Wallsend through what is now the centre of modern Newcastle. The eastern end of the Roman Empire's northern frontier was protected by 3 forts: Arbea at South Shields, Segedunum at Wallsend, and Pons Aelius on the high ground above the River Tyne in what was to become Newcastle. This is the earliest known crossing of the river and the origin of Newcastle as a settlement. Archaeological evidence has shown that there was not only a bridge and a fort here in Roman times, but also a civilian settlement. The advent of Norman control in the 11th century saw the establishment of Newcastle's contemporary urban landscape. The continuity of the city's history is illustrated by the building of the Royal Castle, founded in 1080 by Robert Curthouse, son of William the Conqueror, on the same advantageous sandstone bluff high on the River Tyne as that used for the Roman fort. This was the New Castle, which gave the town its name. The shape of Newcastle, the northeast's principal settlement, was established in the medieval period. Not only were its defences, boundaries and churches built, but its medieval street pattern, quayside and markets were established. The replacement of the original timber castle in stone, the construction of the Cathedral Church of St Nicholas and the building of the town walls, begun in the reign of Henry III, established Newcastle as one of the country's key medieval towns. The strength and magnificence of the town's walls far passeth all the walls of the cities of England and most of the cities of Europe. That was said by some bloke called Leyland in 1540. It was within the largely 13th century walls that the town thrived, spreading out from the high ground around the castle and St Nicholas's church. 3 main streets led to the gates and the walls, 4 principal churches developed and the precincts of at least 8 religious houses, a Benedictine nunnery and 4 houses of the Austin, White, Grey and Black Friars all stood within the medieval town. Newcastle had enormous strategic importance as a base and fortress in every period of conflict between the Scots and the English, from Norman and early Plantagenet times to the Second Jacobite Rebellion. Its role guarding the border to the north was augmented by the great medieval castles of the Northumbrian coast. The strategic importance of Newcastle was matched by its growing importance as the centre of what was to become known as the Great Northern Coalfield. The accessible coal measures have been exploited by the Romans but was established as a medieval industry in 1239 by charter of Henry III, and so began the area's 750-year-long association with coal, the region's Black Diamonds. An association which would in time involve powering a revolution and fostering the development of a means of transport which would change the world forever. By the time of the Civil War, Newcastle is established as not only a regional capital, but as the second city in the land. The river is plentifully supplied with salmon, the quay at Newcastle, the fairest in the land, and the Nag's Head, the finest built inn, wrote a contemporary chronicler. Newcastle is the most wealthy coal port in the country, reviving the early links across the North Sea and with the towns of the southern and eastern England, and most of all providing the heat and power to foster the rise of London. The hearth that warms the south port of the kingdom with fire. It is a town of vital strategic and political importance in the Civil War, the site of the siege, and the Battle of the Newburn Ford. The stirrings of the very industrial revolution began on Tyneside, with the use of coal to fire the manufacture of glass. Tyneside also continues to lead the country in the vital manufacture of salt. The increasing importance of coal for domestic and early industrial use was the catalyst for the development of wagonways, the precursor of modern railways. The Great Northern Coalfield, with Newcastle at its heart, is the cradle of and the driving force behind Britain's industrial revolution. The steam locomotive, and with it the modern railway, was originally developed not to provide public transport, but to serve the coal industry. The work of George and Robert Stephenson in the 1820s and 1830s developing the locomotive, most famously of which was the Rocket, in their Newcastle works, which was the first purpose-built locomotive works in the world, was arguably the most important industrial advancement of the 19th century. Within a few decades of the success of the Rocket at the Rainhill Trials Railways had begun across not only Britain and Europe, but were opening up North America and the subcontinent. By 1860, the Tyne was Britain's second most important river. It was the focal point of the golden age of coal, iron and steam. Coal mining, railway engineering and shipbuilding formed an interconnected relationship which lay at the base of Britain's prosperity, its industrial power and its global strength. The growth and achievement of the region was embodied in that of Newcastle itself. Its rise was meteoric. The population grew from 28,000 in the year 1820 to 215,000 in the year 1900. It contained some of the largest industrial complexes in Europe, especially the mighty Armstrong Works, employing 25,000 people by the late 19th century. Newcastle also underwent, in the course of a decade, an architectural transformation unique to English cities. Richard Granger, builder, developer and entrepreneur, was without a doubt the single most important influence on the development of central Newcastle in the 19th century. He changed the appearance, the nature, the commercial heart and the external perception of Newcastle. His creation of a wholly new stone-built classical town centre using a range of high-quality architects including John Dobson, Benjamin Green, Thomas Oliver, John Wardle and George Walker within the still predominantly medieval town was one of the architectural achievements of the 19th century. Its brightest jewel was Grey Street, the noblest and most magnificent street, said Howitt. One of the best streets in England, said Pevsner. England's finest street, said Gladstone. You walk into what has long been termed the coal hole of the north, wrote William Howitt, and you find yourself at once in a city of palaces, a fairyland of newness, brightness and modern elegance. Following the collapse of the coal mining industry, Tyneside's reputation for innovation was carried into the later years of the Victorian epoch. The area now becoming synonymous with the development of a new form of power, a new source of heat and light. In the closing years of the 19th century, Tyneside was the scene of the invention of the electric light bulb. Not only that, but it was the scene of the invention of the application of turbine power to marine engineering, in doing so building the Turbinia, the fastest vessel at the time. Developments which heralded the enormous and rapid changes in technology, life and society in the 20th century. Economic and social reform was then made. The development of the Byker Wall is one of Europe's leading examples of social housing at the time. The plans in the 1960s to 1970s to create the Brasilia of the Old World sought to transform Newcastle city centre, but largely left intact the work of Granger. Throughout the streets of the town and the surrounding landscapes, there is evidence of centuries of the layering of Newcastle's culture, history and heritage. The city's identities, from the Roman frontier, the Norman stronghold, the great medieval town, the home of the railways, the industrial powerhouse, are widely varied, yet it is a story of continuity and longevity, of importance and innovation, unmatched anywhere else in the country. Thank you very much for watching.